We're back with another episode talking about the news from James Gunn about his plans for the DC universe. In particular, we're going to be looking at the movies that he's mentioned in this episode. There are 5 new movies coming to the DC universe. So joining me in the Wave Rider, we have
Stuart,
Rob,
and I'm Liam. So, all right, guys, let's jump into this. There is 5 different movies that he's talked about. So this is not the movies that we already know are coming out, like Shazam, Fury of the Gods, and the Flash movie, Flashpoint. We know that they're coming out. And we know of the Joker Part 2 and Batman Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
So we know, which is formerly now called Batman Part 2, isn't it? He said that that's the name for that one.
Yeah.
So we know that those movies are coming out. And he was never going to stop them anyway because those movies did well. So he's going to go.
Money.
But he's announced that he's got 5 new movies that are in the pipeline. So let's start this off. Well, actually, I went to Stuart first on the last one, so I'm going to go to you, Rob. Superman Legacy. What do we know?
Not a lot, really.
He's writing it.
Sorry?
He's writing
it. But from what he said, it's not an origin story, so finally, we're not going to get another origin story. Good. But it's a plot of Superman balancing his Kryptonian heritage with his human upbringing. So Man of Steel again.
But it's not an origin story.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of curious if
that's
he's,
the thing. I mean,
how far he's into his career in this as well.
Yeah.
That's what will be interesting because in the Snyderverse, we had all those movies were telling. Really, they were all the origin of Superman, and they were going to end with him becoming the Superman that we know from the comics. Yeah. He never really reached that point in the movies because he never got a chance to finish it that way. So it's good that with this new rebooted universe, that we're just skipping past all of that, him finding his way, and we have a fully well-established Superman. So I think that's good to not have the origin story again. It'll be interesting as to whether it truly is just going to ignore the not go over the origin story again, because we've heard stuff like that before. When we got the Spider-Man movies rebooted with Andrew Garfield, originally they said that this was not going to be another origin story. It's going to be a continuation. That was crap. It was an origin story again. You got it there.
You can have some flashbacks. I don't know, some flashbacks all him in the fortress.
Especially if you're going to have,
telling some of the story.
You're going to be tying his human and Kryptonian heritage together. You're going to need to see some of the Kryptonian side of things, especially if you're going to be changing the way that Krypton looks again for this film. Because each time you've seen Krypton on screen, it's been a different interpretation and that kind of stuff. So,
but there's a lot of good versions of Krypton.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the version that we got in the old, the original movies. The ones that we got in the version of Krypton in the Snyderverse was awesome.
And the Krypton TV show.
The version of Krypton, in the Krypton TV show was great as well.
That was amazing.
So we've had some cool versions, especially for a TV show. So, yeah.
Well, the only reason I said it's Man of Steel again is because this is the first film, he said in his Twitter statement, that's going to be launching the DCU as a project. So this is the first big major step forward, which is what they tried to do with Man of Steel. And I've always found it strange that they decided to go with Superman as the first film in that, because he's this big, in-your-face character, and they've said they're going to try and ground him a little in this, or at least it looks like they're going to focus more.
You should try and humanise him, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of curious what villain you would pick for the big first film of the DCU.
Looking at what
would you do? Lex Luthor again?
No,
would you do Zod again?
No,
not to be modern era, but looking at the way they've described this, the villain's going to be society. Because he's
social media.
Yeah.
So I think that it makes sense to start off with Superman, because there is no bigger superhero in the world, no better known superhero. So he's largely considered the most powerful superhero. So you can't get bigger than Superman. Yeah. So it makes sense. You're going to kick it off with a bang, and you have to kick it off with a kick-ass Superman movie like Man of Steel was, so you need to, the original Superman the motion picture, so it makes sense to kick that off.
It's a gamble
to kick it off with him.
It's going to be a gamble. Like
it
Man
is
of
a
Steel
gamble,
was,
so long as you do it good.
The casting right, and that's going to
I also find it fun that James Gunn himself is like, well, he's going to direct it, so it's like, oh, of course, you've got the keys to the DCU, you're going to make sure that you get the Superman movie.
That makes sense. Yeah, I do that.
It makes sense, but yeah, villain-wise, I hope we get something new. I hope he just does what people have been asking for forever, which is Brainiac. Give us Brainiac.
Him saying he's fighting between his Kryptonian heritage and his human upbringing. I mean, if they're doing the version of Brainiac that comes from Krypton, then that would make total sense, right? He brings Kandor to Earth. You have that whole history. He would learn more about his Kryptonian heritage through Brainiac. That would be a really cool film. And just seeing Superman, if you want to do a big bang film where you see Superman at his full strength, you have a shit ton of Brainiac androids, and he fights them all and destroys them all, and it's amazing. That's all you have to do. You have to have like 100 robots. He just punches one, freezes one, heat visions another one, blows loads away. Like, you can just do it, and it would look amazing. And it'd be like, that was the best Superman film ever because he did all this.
Top of my head, the best casting you could possibly do for this right now would be Nick Cage. He's already done the screen test.
Jesus Christ! Oh my God.
I know. I think we get Tyler to just come from the TV show straight over to the movie.
I mean, that'd be cool.
Perfect.
That'd be cool.
So, talking about the super family then. Supergirl.
Yeah, so we're also getting a Supergirl World of Tomorrow movie, which I think he made the point, which has always been the case, but it's interesting. It's never really looked into like too much about the fact that Superman grew up on Earth, so fully grew up on Earth, whereas Supergirl, she grew up and into her early teens on Krypton, on a version of Krypton where there was infighting, there was civil war, there was all types of chaos going on Krypton while she was growing up. So she had to grow up in a way to be more hardened to it, and then so she comes to Earth with all this knowledge and with this all this experience that's really going to shape her who she is, and so we're going to get a very different version of Supergirl in this movie, because I think he said that he's going to play off of that a lot more.
I feel like it could be like a sort of, if you like the Wonder Woman movie when she came to mankind from Themyscira.
I wouldn't mind seeing
it was totally alien to her.
Well,
I kind of feel like it could be that.
And that level of disattachment from her human side, because I worry that if you go too far down the dark route with her, that she's going to end up being like a lot of the I don't know how to say this without sounding horrifically sexist. The female characters we've seen in a lot of TV shows recently, like the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon, where they tried to make Galadriel into more of a leader than she is in the books, and it absolutely fell flat because they just didn't carry a characterization right. She came across as a completely horrible character. So you run that risk of taking somebody like Supergirl, and like your girls, Liam, have seen the show Supergirl, so they've got that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the pinnacle of what the character can be, but that's the expectation that people who grew up with that show
There is the expectation that people who don't read the comics are going to use that TV show as the expectation. And that, as you guys know, I really liked the Supergirl TV show. The budget clearly got cut significantly as the seasons went on, and you could see that on screen, but the writing was great and the acting was great too. So I think it was a fun show, and that's what people are going to be familiar with. I think the thing with Supergirl is, in my opinion, you can't go down too much of a dark route with it, because then you're making her an anti-hero, on it, and she's not an anti-hero. Right? She is, exactly. She's a beacon of hope. She is a very positive. She's part of the super family, for crying out loud. Like she can't be dark. And one of the biggest complaints that a lot of people had about the Snyderverse was that his version of it was a very dark take on the DC universe, and people want a brighter, more colorful, Suicide Squad-esque, very colorful and fun kind of thing. I'm like, all right, I think that's cool. I think you can go down that route. That means you can't take Supergirl in too dark of a route, but you can make it so that she's a complex character that has some inner conflicts.
You said it earlier, Stu, the Brainiac animated film. Is it Superman Unleashed? Yes. Where she's in it at the start.
Unbound.
Where she's in it at the start, and she's a lot harder to take, because goes to take those robbers out, and she just smashes the chopper up and pulls them out without thinking about it. And then,
Yeah.
but then when Brainiac arrives, because she experienced what he did to Krypton, she's terrified and she's got PTSD and she's trying to work through all of that. And it's like that was a really good take on both of what you just said.
Yeah,
so
I'm kind of curious if Superman, because from the way I've watched it through shows and comics, is that she comes to Earth and Clark teaches her how to be that hopeful beacon, and then that's why she takes on the S to look like Superman. So I'm kind of curious. I don't think they would so early on, but to bring in the actor that's going to be in Superman Legacy into that film to somehow link it up, or whether she sees him on TV or something. That whole, I love the dynamic of. It's very similar to, like, we'll talk about in a minute, like the Batman Damian dynamic of, like, him and Clark and Kal-El and Kara, of being like, he's grown up and he's got this good nature, but she's been through, you say, civil war, seen all this horrible stuff happen, so she's got more heart, and he try and breaks that down. I kind of like to see that in a movie, but I know that you can't do that straight away. So it's kind of going to be interesting to see how they pull it off and how they make her Supergirl without involving Clark. Is what I'm quite curious.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, that's one of the things that people thought about the Supergirl TV series. And if you look at season 1 of that, you had a subtle reference, a subtle tie-in to Superman. She instant messenger to Clark at Daily Planet. You know, that she was messaging like that, and you got a brief moment of him, like you saw his boots when he suddenly flew in the way of some bullets or something. I forget. So it was, you got this tiny little bit, but it was good because then it didn't take away from Supergirl. So I don't know. I think it's cool that we are getting a Supergirl movie. I think it's very cool we're getting a Supergirl movie. I just hope that it's what it needs to be, and it needs to be something that that does for the audience and for like society and whatnot. It needs to be a movie which is going to be of interest and accessible to boys and girls, and it needs to be a very positive, empowering thing for girls, while still being a very exciting thing for grown-ups as well. You know, for us all to watch.
So for positive and empowering things for boys, how about Damian Wayne?
Batman, the
Damian Wayne. Yeah. So that great segue there onto the next movie, Batman: Brave and the Bold. So Stuart, why don't you lead us into that one?
Feel free. So I'm excited for it. It's Batman. I love Batman. Tell from my background, I'm a huge Batman fan. And when I first got back, I stopped reading comics for a while. So when me and Liam were younger, we used to go comic book shopping all the time, buy those old comics, great. And for years I stopped. I got back into it around about Blackest Night, and we'll talk about Green Lantern in the next podcast. But around that time as well is when Damian and Dick Grayson was playing as Batman, and that whole storyline of that, and the Brave and the Bold storyline was around that time as well. So I'm excited to see how they do the whole Damian being an assassin, just want to kill people, and Batman being like, no, that's not what we do. It's justice, not vengeance.
So for people that aren't familiar with the character of Damian, some people think of just Dick. Why don't you explain?
So Damian Wayne is the son of Batman and Talia al Ghul, where she basically drugs him, has sex with him, and
wholesome stuff,
and grows a child in a test tube and becomes Damian, and then he's raised by Ra's and Talia to be the next demon's head. So basically, is taught to kill from a very young age, has no qualms in killing people. That is justice to him. And then Talia, well, in the comic and in the animated movie, Batman and Son, which came out a few years ago, which is a fantastic movie. Like the 3 movies they did about Damian in those movies were great. He gets Talia gives it Damian, or Damian goes to find his father, and Batman has to basically be like untrain him to be a killer. And I'm really, because he's an arrogant prick when you first meet him in the comics and in the show, and it takes a long time. And actually, in the comic books, it's Dick that brings it out of him.
Same to what you were saying, Stu. When I first started reading the Batman and Son storyline when he shows up in the comics, I fucking hated him. He was, and I know that's the point that Grant Morrison was going for with the character, but it wasn't until the Batman R.I.P. storyline where Bruce died in inverted commas, if the comic book died, and then you had Dick taking on the mantle with the cowl, and then that storyline mellowed him out a bit. There was also a couple of other storylines I read, I can't remember the name of my head, where it's more about him as a character trying to overcome the trauma of his father's death, and you get to know him more as a character over line, and it's not until he grows to become worthy of Robin, that you kind of get to like the guy. So introducing him to people who don't know who Damian Wayne is, as the kind of prickish character he is, and also skipping all of the other Robins for the sake of...
Yeah.
Well, you know what? At this point, if we're jumping into a Superman movie where he's already fully established, by all accounts, Batman should be fully established. We should maybe even have Nightwing.
Yeah,
100%. Well, he said in the video it's going to be the introduction of the Bat family, so that makes me hint that they will bring in a Jason Todd, a Tim Drake, and a Dick Grayson at some point. Maybe not in that film, but definitely start.
Well, I said to you, Stuart, before we started the podcast, that maybe that's an animated feature they're going to do. So they'll have a Nightwing, Jason Todd, and Tim Drake, or maybe even Stephanie and Cassie in the background, perhaps Barbara, in animated features. So you can have the film with Damian if that's what you want to do. But then for the people who are going to be the completionists and watch all of this new stuff that's coming out, you've got the animated features that show you each of those characters and how they came to be in it. And
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Nightwing movie come in like the next couple of phases or whatever he's calling it. Because at the moment in the comic books, I haven't read any, but I've been catching up on what's been happening. He is now the biggest character in DC Comics is Nightwing. Yeah, there's this big crisis, the thing that's just happened. And he pretty much is the one that saves everything.
You know,
and
he's all of our favourite characters. You know,
the Justice League is gone. The Teen Titans have now taken over.
Yeah, the Titans are now basically the Justice League,
and he's the leader. So I wouldn't be surprised with the popularity in the comics if we don't see a Nightwing movie pretty soon after these movies that he's announced comes out. I say he's my favourite. I'm a Batman fan, but actually Dick Grayson is my favourite character. So I'd be more than happy.
I think there was one of my favourite comic panels of him as Nightwing is in. The crisis that came before Final Crisis in all of the crises leading up to that. And it was just after Connor had found out he was Lex Luthor's son. Lex Luthor had mind controlled him and made him attack the Teen Titans at that point in time. And then the crisis was happening, and he locked himself away because he was upset with himself about what he'd done under mind control. And then he realises he needs to go to the Arctic to go and fight the main villain, but he's going to die if he does that. So he calls out to all the Titans, I need help, this is Connor, and they're all engaged in the battles. And the one person that shows up to help is Nightwing. And it's the entire comic is Nightwing and Connor getting to the Arctic, and Nightwing just giving Connor the biggest pep talk of his life. And it's just such a Nightwing moment. It's so good.
The thing that makes him great, and I swear, I can't remember if it was in the recent comics, but it's definitely a moment where Batman admits that Dick is a better hero than he is because he doesn't have the darkness in him that Bruce does.
Yeah.
He's got he got a bit of it, but he's got that beacon of hope that maybe Superman has as well. So he's got that balance, and it makes him a better hero for it. And I think again, best hero. Talk about it for hours. Yeah. Next movie.
Yeah, we got to move on. The other two movies that we have is there's going to be a Swamp Thing movie, and there's also going to be The Authority.
Well, let's touch on Swamp Thing first, because there's not much to say about that, really, apart from...
Well, Swamp Thing, the TV show that they did a few years ago was absolutely amazing.
It was fantastic. Really dark.
Go back and check it out on our reactions.
And I mean, that's
amazing.
That's not... I know that was supposed to be part of the Titans verse and all that sort of stuff, and it wasn't really connected to any of that. I know it was really expensive, and they had to cancel it due to all the production issues. Revive that, get the cast back, have that as the origin, and then move on with the show. I know James Gunn.
Absolutely.
James Gunn says he wants to do Justice League Dark, and they were already introducing the Blue Devil and all that kind of stuff in the show. Let's get on with the weird stuff. I'm
Perfect
all for
setup.
this. Yep, let's go.
Yeah. Yep. The show looks great. It wasn't that long ago. You can still just re-release that season whilst you're developing the movie and that. That'd be great. So the other thing, but otherwise we don't really know much about Swamp Thing. There's no other news on it.
It's a horror film.
It's horror. As more news comes out, we'll talk about it more. So the other one is The Authority.
I'm excited for this if they do it right.
No idea.
I am really excited for this because this is a weird choice, but I like it.
All right, so why don't you explain for anyone who doesn't know what The Authority is? What is The Authority?
The Authority is the Justice League whose ends justify the means. They will happily kill 1,000 people if it saves the world.
Peacemaker Justice League.
It's a Peacemaker Justice League.
It's
so it makes sense that James Gunn is going to do
the original
Justice League like that.
The original run is very 90s because it was written by Warren Ellis. So if you've ever read any Warren Ellis' stuff, you know where this is going. It's dark and all about the human condition and stuff. But the characters themselves are just a lot of fun. You've got the Midnighter, who's a proxy of Batman, but he's got machinery in his head that he can analyze fights. So when he gets into a fight with somebody, he'll figure out how you fight and then beat you. and that kind of way.
Okay.
You got Apollo, who's a Superman proxy. Nothing to say there. You got Jack Hawksmoor, who's the god of cities. He's more powerful depending on which. So if he goes to a big city, he becomes really, really powerful. If he goes to a town, he becomes less powerful. But he can then use the town to fight you by slamming buildings into you and things like that. You got my favourite character.
Seems fun.
Jenny Sparks, who is a hard-talking, swearing London British woman who is the reborn. I don't know if they're going to go with this route. She's originally just got electric powers, but then later on in the show it's revealed she's the spirit of the 20th century, and she's been alive since the 1900s, and she dies on midnight in the 2000s. Because the 2000s is the start of the quantum era, so she's no longer the spirit of the 20th century. She's the spirit of the 21st century.
Okay.
But then her spirit is reborn each time she dies into the spirit of that era. But the spirit of the 20th century was electricity, and she's a bit jaded because she's been alive for over 100 years, just sort of trying to do superhero stuff, and by the time you meet her in the comics, she just does not give a flying fuck. It's just like, so she's pulled together this team of superheroes they're originally in the Wildstorm universe, so it's 90s AF kind of stuff. Yeah. And they right, the world's in crisis, and we're gonna solve it, and fuck you if you get in the way. It's kind of the attitude. So if you do that, you do that right,
definitely watch it.
Yeah, if you do that right, it could work. Yeah.
So that's it. That's all the news that we know for the movies. The 5 movies that have been announced by James Gunn for kicking off his version of the DC universe. Let us know what you, the audience, the fans, think about these plans. Are you excited for any of these movies? Are you disappointed about any of this news? Anything you wanted to see there that's not there? Let us know in the comments. It'd be great to hear what you guys think about it. And remember to click that subscribe button so you'll be notified as we release new episodes. And this podcast is released in both audio and video versions. So it's available on all podcasting platforms where you listen to podcasts, as well as on our YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed. There was an episode before this one where we talked about some of his plans for the DCU, and then there's also going to be an episode after this where we talk about the TV shows. So that's all from me.
That's all from me.
That's it from me.